17th of 2021, there is security footage of Heidi. She's leaving her townhome with her dog, and the footage really looks pretty, innocuous, and there's really nothing when you look at it that seems it could be nefarious, or you don't really see Heidi in any kind of distress. Now, Heidi is in her late 30s. She's a beautiful woman. She is quite petite. I believe she's like maybe 5'3", and probably around 120 pounds. She has these beautiful blue eyes and just a really beautiful looking person overall. And when she's seen on this footage, she's wearing jeans, a t-shirt with a smiley face on it, and she has a gray sweater wrapped around her waist. In her hands, she has a mobile phone and a coffee cup, or coffee, not necessarily a cup. And trailing behind her is her adorable Labradoodle doggy, and his name is Seven. Which, when I first learned about this case and I read that she named her dog Seven, I had wondered, did she get that name from an episode of Seinfeld where I believe it was George Costanza who wanted to name his child Seven or Six? Wait, yeah, I believe it was Seven. Anyway, so this is the footage that you see when you look at the footage of Heidi when she's leaving her townhome. This is what you see. And so Heidi gets into a silver Range Rover with California license plates, and you can see her driving away. After that, there's really not too much of any hints or clues as to what happened to Heidi later on in the day. It's a very mysterious disappearance, and one of the most mysterious disappearances in recent Los Angeles history. There was a big media frenzy with these attention-grabbing headlines, like missing mom headlines, and there was quite a investigation into her disappearance. So, the day of Heidi's disappearance, after that footage, what she was doing was she was driving to meet up with her ex-husband. His name is Jim Wayne, and Jim and Heidi had been divorced for quite a number of years by this point, but they were on good terms, and they shared custody of their son, who was 11 years old at the time. His name is Bond, as in like James Bond. So she was driving to go to the football field to go watch her son playing football, and as I said, she was going to meet up with her husband, who, by the way, is a prominent Beverly Hills hairstylist. Now, a few days before that, Jim and Heidi really well that day, and later on, Heidi had sent Jim flowers and a really sweet text message, and she was thanking him for doing all that he does for his son Bond, and she told him that she appreciates him and that their son adores him, and she said, "You're a very special person to our son." However, at the football game, something was visibly upsetting Heidi. Witnesses say that she was fidgety, she was distracted, and right around halftime, she abruptly leaves. And that is the last time that Jim and Bond see her. For the next 3 days, Jim and Bond, they become more and more nervous when the calls and texts that they send her are going unanswered. In a text sent on October 18th at 7:31 p.m., Heidi's son Bond sent a text saying, quote, "Can you please call me back? I called you 2 days in a row and you haven't picked up." End quote. Then after school on October 19th, Bond tried texting his mother again, this time saying, "Please call or just text me, because I want to make sure that you're okay, and I'm worried about you." Again, they don't hear anything back. Later that same day, Bond sends another text saying, "Please call Mom. I miss you and I'm worried about you." Now the next day, October 20th, Heidi was supposed to pick up Bond at school. Bond went to a private school in Westwood, and Heidi never shows up. After a bunch more unanswered text messages, Jim drove to the West Los Angeles police station to file a missing person report, and then one of Heidi's friends actually went to check out the townhouse to see if maybe, Heidi was in the house, maybe hurt or something. But there was no sign of her or the dog, or her Range Rover for that matter. Her mobile phone was in the house, along with her work laptop, and nothing seemed out of place. So Jim said of Heidi that there's no way that Heidi would just not show up for Bond, that would just never happen. And so he knew at that moment that something was really, really off. Because he said people just don't disappear. So Jim tries calling Heidi's current boyfriend. He is somebody that Heidi had been seeing for about 3 years, and he is a super nice guy. Anybody who spoke about this man says that he's the sweetest person in the world, and his name is Naeem Salam. And Naeem is the Vice President of Operations for the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which, if you don't know what that is Facebook's philanthropic organization. So Naeem tells Jim that he had not seen Heidi in a while because he had been really busy with work. However, he does say that Heidi had sent him an alarming text message telling him that she was afraid and asking him to come down to LA. And this is on the weekend that she had disappeared. But there was no way that he could make it. Beyond that, he had no more information. Jim decided to take matters into his own hands, and he began his own amateur investigation. He tried to use the location tracking system in Heidi's SUV, but it had been turned off. The location finder on her earbuds and her Apple Watch had also been shut off, which according to Jim was really odd because he felt like that had to have been done deliberately and systematically. Then Jim remembers that the dog had been microchipped, so he goes to the family vet to see if there's any way to track the location of the dog. But no sooner had he arrived, Heidi's work phone receives a text message from an occupant of a high-rise luxury apartment complex, and it's called the New Hope and Flower Building in downtown LA. The dog had been found several days earlier on October 17th, just hours after the football game, and he was wandering around the 28th floor. Jim and the LAPD say that Heidi had no known connections to the area or to the building, which, it being a new building, had plenty of surveillance equipment. But for unknown reasons, the building's management, they were initially reluctant to cooperate with the police. But ultimately, after a warrant was issued, they handed over a video that showed Heidi was walking her dog in an alley behind the building. She was now wearing what appears to be that sweater that she originally had tied around her waist. And this becomes Heidi's last known location. The police, meanwhile, performed several more checks of Heidi's townhouse, including one on October 29th, in which they entered with guns drawn, but they did not find anything overtly suspicious. They left the townhouse wondering, how is it that a woman who made $145,000 a year working as a financial controller at Camden Capital Partners could afford what she could afford? She had her top-of-the-line $90,000 Range Rover. The rent on her townhouse, which is 2,000 square foot home with 28-foot-high ceilings, a floating staircase with glass railings, and walls filled with expensive modern art. They all wondered, how could she afford all this? Now, the townhouse had been listed for sale in 2019 for $1.7 million. So, with all that wondering, how does Heidi pay for this? Jim said that when they got divorced in 2012, that Jim paid a lump sum in alimony and he had paid no other money since. So, it definitely was not the money that she got from Jim. Jim actually had no idea where or communications, and he said that Heidi had told him that her boss floats her money when they close a deal. Well, everybody kept asking, how is she affording this? And Jim basically said, I don't really know, go talk to her boss because he's really the only one that could answer that question. But the trouble with asking her boss is that she doesn't appear to have one. At least, not one who isn't currently on trial for massive financial malfeasance. So the company that Heidi works for is called Camden Capital Partners, and the registered address is Heidi's townhouse. And at present, a public record search shows Heidi is listed as its only employee. Something else that perhaps can shed some light on Heidi's disappearance, or maybe not at all, but it's important to talk about facts, are family court documents which reveal that Heidi's life, which began in suburban Buffalo, New York, before she made her way to LA, was filled with turmoil and psychological issues, as well as substance abuse. Now, Jim alleged in court documents that Heidi was addicted to benzodiazepines and Adderall. Now, Jim said a lot in court records, but I did read the court records, but I feel it's not proper and a little insensitive and irresponsible, frankly, to read the court records on what he had to say about her, because realistically, we're only reading what Jim said about her, and perhaps, that stuff is true, but it is only one side of the story. He does claim that, Heidi was not acting in the best interest of her son or even herself, and he tried to fight for full custody because of that. But I don't want to read those records, but you can find them online if you need to. So, as I said, I guess she was addicted to benzodiazepine and Adderall. And Jim alleged in court records that Heidi would go to 3 different doctors so that she could get 3 separate prescriptions, and then she would make sure that she always paid for 2 of them in cash so that her abuse couldn't be discovered. Heidi's mental health and drug problems were the biggest reason for their divorce and for their custody battle over bond in the years after their divorce. Jim had fought for full custody of Bond, stating in the petition that he had learned to pretty much read when Heidi was, when her conduct wasn't up to par, and that he would be aware of, when she was using drugs. But in the end, they ended up getting shared custody, so 50-50 custody. But even so, it was not difficult for Jim to recognize when Heidi was not doing well. For example, in October 2015, Heidi suffered what Jim described as a full psychotic break. It began when Heidi showed up late to pick up their son Bond, who was 5 years old at the time, and she was picking him up from Jim's salon, and she was late, and And so she told Jim, I can't be in here. It's too intense. So Jim managed to get them back to Heidi's place, but as soon as he had turned around to drive himself home, Heidi called and she was in distress, and she asked him to come back and take them to his house. So Jim managed to return, and Heidi was sitting outside and she was holding a plate full of bacon, which she was trying to get Jim to eat. So Jim thought that she might be intoxicated, but by the time they all got back to Jim's house, Heidi seemed to have calmed down. But that's until Jim heard their son shouting for him, saying that his mom just made a mess of his bedroom. Heidi had ransacked Bond's bedroom, and then she hopped out of his window and she jumped over a neighbor's fence. Minutes later, another neighbor calls the police after seeing Heidi climbing on roofs and over fences. When the police arrive, they find Heidi partially clothed, and she was switching an electrical circuit breaker on the street on and off. So Heidi voluntarily checked herself into a psychiatric hospital, and according to court records, she did this, but a day later, she calls Jim again and she's begging him to take her home, and she was claiming that she was being molested. And Jim tells her, look, you need to stay. And so then she says to him, why do I have a C-section scar when we have no children? And he was telling her, we have a son together, and she said, no, we don't have any children, and then she hung the phone up. So whatever was going on with Heidi, it seemed that she was doing better by 2017. This is when she started a job as an assistant at Camden Capital Partners, which at that time, the address was not just listed as her address. It had, other addresses or whatnot. But Camden Capital could really not be described as a safe place to work or even a sane place to work. That is because her new boss was a man named Jason Sugarman. Jason is the now indicted financier, and he is the son-in-law of Peter Gruber. Peter Gruber is the owner of, some basketball team. He's some big, Hollywood mogul, and Jason is his son-in-law. And Jason would be investigated and charged by the Securities and Exchange Commission for a highly complex tribal bonds scheme that allegedly defrauded Native Americans from the Sioux Nation of $43 million. Now, Jason's partner at Camden Capital Partners was a man named Jason Galanis, and he is a man from Los Angeles, and Forbes named him Porn's new king. Yes, you heard that correct. Porn's new king. And that was thanks to his billing service for pornographic websites. So all you looky-loos out there can thank Jason Galanis for the fact that you can go on Pornhub. You're welcome. Now, along with a bunch of other shady characters, including Sugarman and Jason Galanis were accused of using investments from their Native American clients to line their own pockets with cushy little trinkets and some bigger ones like apartments in Tribeca and, new cars, vacations, and whatnot. Jason Galanis pled guilty to securities fraud and is serving 15 years in a minimum security prison in San Pedro, and Devin Archer is still waiting sentencing. But Heidi was never implicated in the scandal, but nevertheless, she scaled the ranks of the company, rising from Jason Sugarman's assistant to financial controller, and she would oversee all employees involved in the accounting process. So what does any of this have to do with her disappearance? It could be nothing. It could be everything. To this day, nobody knows quite yet. So Jim has made a statement, and I'm going to quote unquote this. He says, quote, "Stealing from Native Americans is a whole new level of dirtbaggery. Dirtbags associate themselves with other dirtbags, and there are a lot of dirtbags around my wife's job. Good stays with good. Bad stays with bad. There are a lot of bad people around Jason." End quote. I tell you, Jim is quite descriptive. So even if Jason Sugarman had nothing to do with Heidi's disappearance, he did not even seem all that helpful, or even did not even care, it seemed. Because when Jim contacted him to ask, do you know anything about Heidi or where she is, he was just like, I don't have any idea, and did not even seem interested. He didn't even offer to help. According to Jim, Jason Sugarman wouldn't even get on the phone, and he would have his assistant deal with Jim rather than talk himself. And all the assistant would say was that Jason wanted Heidi's work laptop back. And when Jim refused, he could hear Jason screaming at his assistant to get his laptop back. This guy sounds like a psycho. But instead, what Jason Sugarman did was he drove to Heidi's townhouse the day after Jim called him, and that security camera that had filmed Heidi getting into her car, well, it now captured Jason outside her front door, ringing the bell, leaving a box of muffins on the stoop before getting in his SUV and driving away. Now, why was he delivering snacks to a woman that he knew was missing is anyone's guess. Now, on the same day that Jason made this pastry run to Heidi's townhouse, Jim gets a follow-up call from Jason Sugarman's assistant, and he's asking again for Heidi's laptop. And during the phone call, the assistant accused Heidi of siphoning money from Camden Capital. And Jim said that he did not believe that for a minute. The assistant allegedly claimed that they had proof, and they end up sending him several of Heidi's personal bank statements, to which he says that he never even looked at them, but he forwarded them to the police. And the officers later told him that Heidi didn't even have a lot of money in her accounts. Of course, Jim, being the descriptive speaker that he is, says that the accusation is the most disparaging thing you can say about another person, especially when Jason is under investigation for stealing millions of dollars himself. He says that although Heidi is his ex-wife and he could say a lot of things about her, the one thing that he would stand by is that Heidi would not steal. I'm so sorry, you guys, if you can hear like 50,000 airplanes throughout this whole video. I live near an airport, and it doesn't sound like this at night, but it sounds like this during the day. It's so annoying. Now, at the end of November 2021, police announced that they would begin searching a landfill in Chiquita Canyon in the city of Castaic. Now, the purpose of the search would be to excavate a specific area of the landfill, manually search it for human remains, and collect any related evidence. It is believed that this specific site was searched, as that is where the waste disposal company working at the Hope and Flower building dumps its trash. The LAPD announced around this time that they had found unspecified forensic evidence in the Hope and Flower complex, leading them to believe that there was an incident resulting in Heidi's death. But they have never elaborated on what they had found. Okay, now we're gonna get into an area that kind of drives me crazy. So apparently some true crime investigators, now I don't know if this was like true crime investigators from YouTube or if it was just a bunch of people collectively who knew Heidi. I'm not really sure, but there does seem to be quite a bit of armchair detectives doing their thing on YouTube, and it drives me insane. I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure probably some of you know who I'm talking about, and like it drives me crazy. Okay, so some true crime investigators, they end up going to this Hope and Flower building, and they end up doing their own investigation, right? So a woman who lives in the building apparently approached them, and she said that she saw Heidi die after Heidi was taking Adderall that was laced with fentanyl at a party on the 40th floor of the complex. This woman said that Heidi knew a dog sitter that had lived in the building, and that she had taken her dog there before heading to the party on the 40th floor. And so she said she was up at this really big party, and they were gambling with cryptocurrency. There were a lot of drugs and strippers, and they brought a stripper pole up there, and they had a DJ. Heidi apparently knew someone who lived in the building, and she purchased the Adderall from him. Some comments say that they were dating or had dated in the past. This person is not Naeem, the one that was her boyfriend of 3 years. The following is information from the alleged occupant of the building. Now please remember, this is alleged, but this is what seems to be going around in the true crime armchair detective circles, which I kind of hate, but I'm going to add it. But just keep in mind, this is all just alleged. So this woman says that Heidi did not do any other drugs, but told me that the Adderall was laced with fentanyl. I was told that that she OD'd in the middle of the dance floor, fell down and broke a glass that she had in her hand. A group of people tried to revive her, but they couldn't, and they got scared because there was a lot of illegal stuff going on in that apartment that night. So a bunch of them took her out and put her in the garbage chute and pushed her down. The girl who is telling me this was there. She saw it happen, and she heard Heidi fall down the chute, but did not hear her stop at the bottom. She said she went to check the chute down to the 28th floor, and when she opened the door to the trash chute on the 28th floor, she saw Heidi was stuck there. The woman told me this in front of 3 other people who work in the building, and they were like, yeah, that's what happened. She also shared videos and a picture, which I was told show the party in the aftermath of Heidi losing consciousness. I mean, if that's true, how fucking disgusting. But again, it's alleged. Now, Jim spoke about all of this information, and he just said that he doesn't really know anything about it, and that he had, spoken to the detectives, and detectives were bringing in some different equipment in the landfill, and that was it. So of course, as I said probably 100 times, it's important to note that the information given by the occupant has never been confirmed as being true, but I mean, you just never know. But I don't know, I kind of find it's a little maybe not cool and irresponsible to say things like that if you don't really know. So maybe I should not even have added it, but I wanted to just give some kind of not even context, because that doesn't even make sense, but there can be many things surrounding this. So anyway, the police have searched the landfill for Heidi multiple times since they first announced that they were going to do so. And one of the most recent articles is from January 7th, 2022. And they talk about their intention to resume searching the landfill. Apparently, they had to stop because of rain. So that's it. That's all the information that I have. And if any of you have updates or know better about what happened, or anything, that I don't know, feel free to leave it in the comments, because I would love to know. I realize this is not my typical deep dive, because as most of y'all know, I get a lot of stuff. I put a lot of detail into my videos. And that's just because I'm that kind of person, though. Like, if somebody's telling me a story and they're like, let's go from A to Z with no information in between, it drives me crazy. I want all the details, even if the details are stupid. I don't care. I want to hear all of it. Freaking airplane. Okay, so anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I have something coming up pretty soon that has never been done by anybody on YouTube or anywhere for that matter, that I have exclusive access to. I'm working with somebody who has this insane story that you guys will not believe, but it's all backed up with court documents and all kinds of things, so it's a lot to go through, but it's insane.